What's up, Wizards? Dev, SBMTG, place down there. There's decks. A lot of decks this past week, actually. I promised them to you. I'm bringing them now. Another budget deck, too. I know how much you guys like this. And this one, I actually think is really, really competitive. I've been testing it. And anytime I get a chance to test a deck like this, I do. Fans of the channel will know that I am a fan of Mono Red. The last few years, I've really started to like Mono Red. I used to be a control player. Love Mono Red now. And Mono Red is usually pretty good at the beginning of formats, you know. We haven't experienced a rotation, but while people are still fine-tuning their decks and trying to figure out what's the right thing to deal with these new Oath of the Gatewatch cards, something like Mono Red can and traditionally does come in and sweep the format. We already saw Tarka Red won the first event of the season, you know, so red aggro decks do very well when people are still fine-tuning decks, and this one's no different. This is Mono Red Goblins. Best news, this deck's only going to cost you like $20 to $30 on TCG Player. Reasonably $25 for this deck right here. And like I said, I think it's actually super duper competitive. So, let me give you the creatures first, starting with the 1-drops as usual. 4 copies of, no surprise here, Goblin Glory Chaser. And 3 copies of, total surprise here, Monastery Swiftspear, the only non-goblin creature in the deck. And the goblin decks that are already in the format, yes they exist, are totally playing Monastery Swiftspear already, usually at a 3 or even a 4-up. We're playing something like 16 spells in this deck. Swiftspear is awesome with that and can really get us off the ground in the early game. We don't have a lot of good options at the 1-drop slot. For a Goblins deck, I think Swiftspear is definitely better than Zurgo, especially considering all these spells we're playing, and better than Lava Step Raider, I believe the only other red Goblin 1-drop right now. And Glory Chaser is obviously just, we're forced to play it. It's on synergy with us, it's on theme, and it's actually not bad, especially followed up by a Subterranean Scout, later on a Goblin Heelcutter. You can get renowned on this fairly easy. So we're forced to play a lot of 1-drops because we want to be as aggressive as possible. These are probably the 2 best. I'm into the 2-drops here. Let's start with 4 obvious copies of Goblin Piledriver. I'd say he's like 9/10 of the reason to play the deck. Goblin Piledriver's in the format. Let's try and play Goblins. Obviously really good with Dragon Fodder and Hordeling Outburst and just our abundance of creatures. We're playing 24 creatures in the deck plus play sets of Dragon Fodder and Outburst, so that's like playing 32 creatures. You can even argue it's like playing 44 creatures if you add up all the tokens. But anyway, you know, we're going to swing in for huge amounts of damage with Piledriver, and we've got multiple ways of making him go unblocked. So, Goblin Piledriver, yeah. 4 copies of Subterranean Scout, in my build at least. I think this is a fantastic card, and the last time I tested Goblins, it was wonderful there too, you know? Just making a Goblin Piledriver go unblocked and then swinging in with it, getting all those buffs, and he still goes unblocked, it does totally work. But in any case, making him go unblocked is just absolutely ridiculous. Helping you second turn get the renown on your Goblin Glory Chaser is pretty relevant in my book. There's all kinds of reasons why this is good. This works on nearly all of our creatures, and then we can apply buffs and things like that to them. So, yeah, totally the Subterranean Scout. I don't see why you wouldn't play a playset of this, or at least 3 copies. To finish off the 2-drops, 2 copies of Mardu Scout in the deck. Card is actually phenomenal, and I could actually see playing 4 copies of it as well. Just fantastic against sorcery, speed removal, mass removal. There's a lot of both of those about in the format right now, like a ton, and this helps out greatly against those. Also, Surge and Dash work pretty darn well together. We're playing a 4-of with Surge, and another card with Dash in the deck. They work fantastically well together. Lowering the cost of casting a creature with Dash is amazing, following it up with a Reckless Bushwhacker, surging that in. That can be, like, awesome and cost you, like, no mana. So, yeah, Mardu Scout has performed admirably, and I could see him being a 4-of, but I don't know what to take out. The deck list is fairly tight here. I've already mentioned him, 4 copies of Reckless Bushwhacker in the deck. Our only creature with a natural casting cost of 3. You know, we've got a spell that gives us creatures and costs 3. We've got a guy that dashes in for 3. The only thing that actually costs 3. But he's incredibly vital to the deck, it turns out. This is exactly the piece that the Goblin deck wanted. And even maybe the mono-red, you know, creature-based aggro deck. So, I love Reckless Bushwhacker. It turns out this card has been incredible. And on the 4th turn with Goblin Piledriver, it's just as good as you want it to be. It's also good with all of our tokens producing cards, allowing us to go very wide, play something, and then a Bushwhacker, and get like a huge swing in. So, I mean, even though this is like the only main deck edition we get from Oath, this is still like the thing the deck really wanted, and it opens up an awful lot of turn 3 and 4 plays for us. 3 copies of Goblin Heelcutter are only 4-drop card at all in the entire deck, but it usually is going to get cast for 3 dashed in. Dash is good for all the reasons I've already mentioned when I was talking about Scout earlier, and also again good in conjunction with Surge. You know, on the 5th turn we get a decent play where we can surge this in, or we can dash this in and then surge in Bushwhacker for sizable damage, especially if we already have a Piledriver on the board. That can get pretty disgusting as a 5th turn play. On to the spells here. We're playing 7 1-drop spells, and I honestly think you can make a case for playing more than that, honestly, just 1-drop spells. Because we're trying to surge a little bit, we're trying to squeeze our mana as much as we possibly can in the first 3 or 4 turns of the game. But this is what I've gone with in testing. It's worked out fantastically for me. Just 4 copies of Wild Slash and 3 copies of Collateral Damage is what I'm running. And you'll see some of these decks will play 4 copies of damage, which totally makes perfect sense to me, honestly. But Collateral Damage is a much maligned card. People you know, poop on it sometimes. But Collateral Damage has been exactly the card that I've wanted in this deck. It's fantastic. Either killing a guy or just dealing 3 to the dome for just the 1 mana, activating Surge, and just, again, squeezing your mana, man. Your Monastery Swiftspear gets a prowess trigger off of it. We have the tokens for Collateral Damage. Just Collateral Damage has been awesome. Wild Slash also can take out smaller creatures and hit the face. Just 7 cards that can either burn them to the dome, super important for a mono red aggro deck, or take out smaller creatures, another thing important aggro deck. So at least these, if not more. Perhaps Fiery Impulse in the main deck, but we do have it in the side. Just 1 odd copy of Temur Battle Rage in the deck. The deck doesn't play any Titan Strength in it. It just plays the 1 Temur Battle Rage and 1 more Temur Battle Rage in the sideboard. This card is not necessarily needed, you know, but there are definitely times where you'll get, you know, a guy that's gotten big off of Reckless Bushwhacker, or even a Goblin Piledriver that gets fantastically huge. Give him double strike with Temur Battle Rage and game over, you know. But we don't necessarily need it. We're getting a lot of mileage out of our creatures and our burn spells and stuff, you know, our token producing spells, and Reckless Bushwhacker to be exact, in conjunction with the tokens, that we don't necessarily need something like Temur Battle Rage to just come out of nowhere. We are building a small army and it only takes us a couple of turns. So, and in just a moment here I'll go over a couple of turn sequences that are important to us and show you exactly how much damage we can do by turn 3. It's actually disgusting. First, I'm going to finish off the spells real quick. This is 4 copies of Dragon Fodder and 4 copies of Hordeling Outburst. Just incredibly integral to how the deck operates. We need tokens. They work with Reckless Bushwhacker. Both these spells work with Monastery Swiftspear. That's important. Work with Goblin Piledriver very well. I mean, just absolutely full play sets of both of these cards I think are vital. Here's the lands here. 20 mountains. That's it. I don't see any reason to play like any fancy stuff. Looming Spires even. I don't necessarily see the reason to play that. I want all of my lands to come into play untapped. It's very important that we do as much damage as possible on the first few turns, and when lands come into play tapped, that can really hinder that process. So yeah, just 20 mountains, keep it simple. Here's the sideboard for you right here, and it's mostly, you know, we get some removal elements and a way to go much lower to the ground even than we already are against certain decks, against, you know, control decks that aren't going to play a lot of blockers. We can take out the Subterranean Scouts and the Heelcutters, and we can go way lower by adding probably Rending Volley if we want to do that, but Collateral Damage is a definite. Reality Hemmorage is good because it takes out Jace or can hit the face, which rhymes, by the way. Mardu Scout is also good to put in against control because it dodges a lot of their removal. And Temur Battle Rage is also good too, just things that allow us to go very, very low against control decks. And that same basic philosophy works against some mid-range decks. And you know, I did give Reality Hemmorage kind of a hard time in the red set review. Boo!
Miller.
Boo! But it turns out that it's actually a fine card. You know, as people have pointed out in Modern, this takes out Etched Champion and Core Firewalker. So maybe I was too hard on you, Reality Hemmorage. It's definitely, you know, fine. And it hits the face too, so yeah. The only other thing I want to touch on the board is Stoneforge Masterwork. It's probably jumping out at a few people. This is good in mid-range matchups and matches that tend to go a little bit longer than we are really comfortable with. We can just make one guy enormous. You know, this is great with all the tokens. And I can see an argument for main decking this, but again, I just think the deck list is really tight and it's hard to take anything out. Although this does, you know, activate Prowess for Monastery Swiftspear. That's good. It activates Surge really cheap for Reckless Bushwhacker. So there's definitely a case for it. I don't know what to take out. Before I move into the power rankings here, I'm going to take a second and go over some of the turn sequences, as I said I would do, for this deck. And sure, I'm going to go over a Christmas Land scenario first, and then a more common scenario, but there's a reason I'm doing this. Bear with me here. First of all, Turn 1, you can play Goblin Glory Chaser, obviously. Turn 2, you're going to play a Subterranean Scout and swing and get Renown with your Glory Chaser. That's 2 damage right there. Now on turn 3, you can play another Glory Chaser and a Reckless Bushwhacker after you play your land. You swing in with everything and that's 10 damage. Assuming you've gone first, they will untap on their 3rd turn, only having 2 lands out, and they will be at 8. So that's good. And then the next turn, that's not even Christmas land. That happens all the time. In the next turn, if you're super lucky, you can play a Goblin Piledriver and another Reckless Bushwhacker, dealing anywhere between 27 and 28 damage, depending on whether or not your second Glory Chaser went Renowned. So that's ridiculous. That's, you know, anywhere, that's a 40 damage in 4 turns. That's an insane damage output for a standard aggro deck. I just want to point that out. But you have to get lucky. That's a nut draw. That's all 10 of the cards that we would draw if we had gone first that game. But it's a good example of turn sequences available to us. And another one, this one's a little more common, is turn 1 Monastery Swiftspear, turn 2 Dragon Fodder. At this point you can swing 2, and assuming you swing first turn, then you've done 3 damage. On turn 3, you can play a Wild Slash and a Reckless Bushwhacker, swing in with everything for 11 damage. At this point, they'll untap on their turn 3 at something like 6 or 8 life if you hit them with the if you hit them with the Wild Slash to the face, they'll untap at like 6 life. That's unbelievable, and that is actually fairly common. But those are just 2 turn sequences that are available, and you'll sort of freestyle different versions of these turn sequences. You know, there's a lot of options available to us. This is going to kind of seem out of left field, but in the Smash Brothers documentary, I know it's weird, Korean DJ, a Smash Bros, professional Smash Brothers player, says that playing the game of Smash reminds him of a freestyle rap. Fans of the channel will know that I dabble in rap from time to time. You may have seen it. If you hear music before a video and there's rapping, that's me rapping. You may have seen Rap Sam. So I've always really liked this analogy, especially as it applies to competitive Magic, and especially aggro decks more than a lot of other decks. Because aggro has all these options on the first 3, 4, maybe even 5 turns of the game. And it's really, you have to figure out the best order to put those in. You have to practice a lot, and you have to freestyle different versions of plays that are available to you. Because on the first 4 turns, there's going to be a variety of plays available to you in an aggro deck. And you have to choose the correct sort of order of operations and get it right. One thing, I'm going to go off on maybe a 30-second tangent. I'm going to try to keep it on, and then I'm going to go into the power rankings, I promise you. But please listen to this. I'm tired, sort of throughout a 20-plus year Magic career that I've been doing now, of hearing people say that aggro isn't a thinking man's deck, that it's a stupid person's deck. I don't agree with that at all, especially the last few years, having really played a lot of aggro decks. Again, there's so many options available to you at any given time. You have to practice and know what you're supposed to do in any given situation, just like any other deck, you know, when you're trying to meta game and figure out how the meta works and what you're supposed to do against a given deck. You have more options on the first few turns than a lot of decks do, and one misstep will lead to certain doom. You know, you screw the whole thing up if you just mess up one play in aggro, and there's a lot of plays to decide from an aggro. So I just, you know, I never really understood the argument that aggro is a dumb person's deck. Tell Craig Wesco that aggro is a dumb person's deck. Just the difference, this is what I'll end this tangent with, the difference between a novice aggro player and an experienced aggro pilot is it's an order of magnitude. There's a lot to learn when trying to figure out how to play aggro effectively. Whew, okay, I hope you guys are still with me because I'm going to give you the power rankings. Here are them right here. That's a final score of 66 for a $25 deck. Again, fans of the channel will know that 66 is an incredible score for a deck that especially it's going to cost you lunch. This deck doesn't cost too much at all. It's fairly versatile. It's got a lot of different plays available to it. It's a little more resilient than the average aggro deck because it's got the dash creatures in it. And Stoneforge Masterwork out of the sideboard helps our resiliency slightly. Not much, but slightly. And then it's very, very offensively minded. It's not often that you see 2 10s for an aggro deck in the power rankings. So, you know, the deck actually has ways of being a little better in certain departments than some aggro decks are. You know, we're playing some spot removal, which gives us some defense. That's good. We're playing dashers. That gives us some resiliency. That's good. So I've had a lot of fun playing the deck. I love mono red aggro and have for years. So I think this deck definitely has a shot and could be one of the better decks at an FNM, you know. Remember to get the deck list from the description. I'm going to start pointing that out from now on. And what are we doing next time? That's always a thing. I think it's time for Simic Flash. That's definitely the other most requested thing in the comments down there, along with maybe an Eldrazi aggro deck. People are wanting that too, but I'm definitely going to do Simic Flash next. Hold on, guys. It's coming. The Simic Flash people are very excited about it, so it's coming. Don't worry. That's all I got for now. If you enjoyed the content, buff that like button, hit the share thing, and let your friends know it's a fine deck. Comment, let me know how you felt about it. What did I leave out? Do we need Titan Strength? I don't think so, but let me know. And I'll see you guys later. Sub if you're new. By the way, I'm supposed to say that too. But in any case, I'm Deb from SBMTG. Thanks for watching, my wizards.